If you would have asked me what a computer programmer did, I would have had this picture of someone in a basement with like a 2 liter of Mountain Dew and some Cheetos typing ones and zeros on a green screen. When I got to see these people work, it was a small group of people, maybe 20 people in the middle of Iowa, but they got to work on these really big projects and do things that had a real impact.
In 2007, everyone was naive about what was about to happen to the economy, and Erin Rollenhagen was no exception. She was equally unaware of the economic challenges ahead and what it would be like to run a software agency. Erin is the founder and CEO of Entrepreneurial Technologies, a software agency with over 20 full-time employees based in Iowa. Yes, the state you might associate only with cornfields and a football team with a questionable offense is home to a highly successful software agency. Who knew? It's been over 17 years since Erin founded Entrepreneurial Technologies, so let's dive in to how she started her career and eventually grew Entrepreneurial Technologies into what it is today. So let's start 17 years ago, or even before she started Entrepreneurial Technologies. And she actually started her career at the University of Iowa. So she started there, the place with a football team that's really questionable in terms of offense. She started there and she went to the University of Iowa thinking that she would be going into creative writing. So she starts in creative writing, and within her first class of doing creative writing, the professor comes in and just starts taking all the papers that they had just turned in and just throws them across the room and is like, this is all crap. And Erin herself is what she's mentioned to me and to others, is that was kind of the moment of like, ooh, maybe I'm not ready for this, or maybe this isn't the right fit for now. So she does this creative writing class and it's not the right fit. So she goes from this and she ends up joining a software company that's a little bit similar to what Entrepreneurial Technologies turns into, but more on that in a second. But she joins this software agency, and she was really there just because of the pay rate. It was a really high pay rate, is what she mentioned to it. She wasn't really looking to go into software and things like that. It really wasn't on her radar. So she joins this software agency, and she ends up kind of finding, as she mentions in the intro clip of this video, is this is way different than what I was expecting. She thought everyone just had like the 2 liters of Mountain Dew and the Cheetos, but that wasn't what she actually came into with. So she ends up finding out they're really good at problem solving. And this problem solving, right, is the part that really has stuck with Erin back then and also till today. So she's doing this problem solving and she's like, I really like this. So she ends up switching out of creative writing. So it's no more creative writing, and she switches into being a software person. And she does software at the University of Iowa and eventually joins back with the same agency here. Now, this agency is mostly doing government work. And so it's kind of an interesting dynamic because, right, you get all these government software, things like that. And she's there for a few years and really, really loves it. But there's still something missing. But let me actually have Erin explain that herself.
I was about 27 at the time, and I think that's kind of this magical age where you've acquired enough knowledge to be a little overconfident in the amount of knowledge that you have acquired. And so there was that aspect of I was starting to feel like, oh, okay, I know what I'm doing here. I can do this. And at the same time, a feeling of, the projects we were working on, as you alluded to, were government projects. They would take years. And in the entire time I worked there, I never met an actual person who used our software as an end user. There were so many layers in between us and the people who benefited from the work. It wasn't as gratifying as you might assume it would be. It was neat from the perspective of, learning such a solid technological background and learning a lot about security and projects at scale and that sort of thing. But there was something missing as far as that connection to the actual work, especially, for someone whose motivation is making a difference. You want to actually connect with people who are impacted by the work.
With that in mind, right, she's not seeing the real impact. She's not actually meeting the people that she's impacting with their software and the apps. She's like, I'm going to start my own agency and at least start it as a side hustle. So she starts this as a side hustle, and she's like, I'm going to do software and different apps because I can do that. And the first way she ended up getting her first clients is through this one person in the Iowa kind of startup ecosystem who had a software company of his own, but really wasn't doing any of the work. He would just kind of send these projects out to different people, and that's kind of how he ran his whole agency. And Erin became one of those people that he would send projects to. And Erin actually got a good amount of work by doing it, just having him send referrals that ended up working pretty well. And eventually, this same guy didn't want to do any of the work. So then all of these referrals, I guess you could say, end up going to Erin herself, and she kind of absorbs his agency, his consultancy, and she's got a really good business going. So between these referrals and then also, as Erin put it when I was talking with her, is that word of mouth was doing really well for her. It was really kind to them for getting started. So with just that alone, she was able to then go full time on Entrepreneurial Technologies, which is now still to this day what she's working on, which is really awesome. This all seems pretty simple, right? Erin's just doing software projects and different, things within software, and she's kind of just built this thing off referrals. And you're right, it is pretty simple. But one thing I do want to know is the types of projects that Entrepreneurial Technologies and Erin has taken on throughout the years and how that's kind of changed. So originally, it seems like from when I talked to Erin and things like that, is that it's actually kind of started out doing maybe smaller projects. So it was more of like they would still do apps and things like that, but they would kind of do anything. So that might mean it's more of a website, which if you maybe have built the website, things like that, right? That's not that big of an expense. That's not a big project necessarily. For that, right, it might be like $2,000. Now, what they've transitioned to over the years is bigger and larger projects because they come with a higher price tag. There's more margin. It's more consistency. So what they've been able to do, right, is they transition from this into more of like probably mobile apps and bigger software that, this also might be, it's not going to just be $2,000. It's going to be probably a minimum of $100,000 for a check. So this is how you can kind of really quickly, right, see how if you transition from a website builder to these bigger clients and these bigger projects, this gives you more consistency, but also higher revenue much faster to make this $250K in 2 years pretty reasonable. So that's kind of the story of Entrepreneurial Technologies and Erin Rollenhagen. It's a pretty simple business. It's doing software and things like that. It's pretty simple. Even the growth strategies are pretty simple as well. There's really one main growth strategy for how Erin has built Entrepreneurial Technologies, and that is referrals. But I would say there are two main types of referrals. But before I get into that, let me actually have Erin explain how she's really thought about referrals with Entrepreneurial Technologies.
Networking groups mattered when we did websites for people, which is a lower investment. I quit going to networking groups several years ago because it's just not the type of investment that people make based off of that sort of casual referral. So past clients are our biggest source. Also, sometimes other people who are in the industry in some way and know the work we do, whether that's investors, people who do something maybe adjacent to what we do, the more marketing focused agencies that don't quite get as deep into the software realm as we do, that sort of thing.
So Erin did a really nice job summarizing how she thinks about referrals there, but let's dive into those a little bit more. And I would say there are two different types of referrals that she talks about. And the first one I would say is client referrals. And this seems pretty easy, but I think it's definitely important to call out. So, right, the one thing that she mentioned, which I think is take this advice cautiously, is that, right, they deliver a little better than expected. And I think the way to really think about this is kind of two ways. One is it's the classic under promise, over deliver, right? This is classic, and it's easier said than done at times, right? Especially because as founders, I think we can be really optimistic, especially on our own skill sets, things like that. But life happens, and also just tech and problems, and how maybe there's like things happen, right? Life happens. So I think the way to think about it, especially talking to clients, and as you're getting going, is I like to think about it in these terms, right? And I think this came into me after talking to Erin a little bit. So one is like, have this 5-star plan in your head, right? Like you're gonna have this amazing plan, and that's what you want to pitch, right? That's what you want to pitch in your own head, right? This is you. This is your plan in your head. And this is kind of like an A+ plan, right? This is like if everything goes really, really well. But the plan you want to actually pitch to a client is like the 3-star plan. And this might be like a B minus plan. It's still really good work. A B minus isn't necessarily bad, but this is the plan that you're going to pitch to the client themselves, because that way, right, is if you hit this B minus plan or this 3-star plan and then actually deliver, maybe it's not the A plus plan, but if you deliver it really close to that, right, you've now under promised, over delivered, and you've done really, really well with that, right? So it's a little better than expected, right? That is the key part. And because of that, right, instead of, a potential someone that you worked with is like, hey, they pitched me this, but they delivered on like 50% of that, right? You're never going to get a referral. But if you're like, hey, yeah, they pitched me this and then they went like crazy bonkers, right? That referral is really easy and it doesn't really actually feel like a transaction. It's more like, hey, they did amazing work. You should definitely, work with them, right? It's a very natural conversation to be having, especially for as a person that's like, hey, maybe it's a startup that I'm working with. It becomes really easy to pitch someone if they're like, yep, they did this, they pitched us this, and they crushed it here. Definitely recommend working with them, right? The referrals become a lot easier if you pitch the 3-star plan and deliver on the 5-star plan or even the 4-star plan, right? So that's client referrals. Let's jump into the second type of referral, and I would say that is industry network referrals. And there's kind of 2 different types, I would say, from talking to Erin on this one. And this is something I actually think is kind of morphed for Erin in Entrepreneurial Technologies over time. So she mentioned when talking with Erin is that she stopped going to these networking groups, right? That were like, it's like, hey, we're just going to network and things like that. Like, you get all these different things, right? So you don't actually know anyone super well. You're just kind of like, hey, I do marketing or I do, this data collection, whatever it might be, right? And Erin mentioned that this actually just didn't result in like good enough clients or like the clients they were looking for. Because as Erin put it, you're not just going to give like $100,000 contract to someone you just met. That's just not going to happen. And it kind of goes back to, right, kind of like we talked about earlier, right, with the, kind of these websites versus the 100K. So this would, from when I was talking with Erin, she mentioned like we could get the $2,000 projects from just going to these networking groups, but what we weren't getting is these 100K projects. So, and now where Entrepreneurial Technologies is today, they're looking for these. So with that, right, so they're not going to these networking groups, but over time, right, because Erin's been doing this for 17 years and, Entrepreneurial Technologies has a really strong reputation, it's really become more of a national, not necessarily a national brand, but they have a really good reputation with really strategic people that are always going to be looking for, for opportunities to maybe work with Erin and that team because they have maybe different teams or different projects going on. And there's kind of 2 different buckets here, right? So it's going to be investors, I would say, from what talking to Erin. And I would say, like, I'm just going to put marketing here, but it's kind of like the groups that are not doing software, right? So investors, right, it might be like they're working with a company, they invested in a company, and let's say like they're growing like crazy, right? They're growing, and you can't maybe hire that person or like a software team that fast. But because Erin has a 20-person team, they might be able to kind of help get this growing going, or even just like maybe it's a side project that actually helps them keep revenue going, whatever it might be, right? So investors can tell their founders like, hey, you should go work with Erin or go talk to Erin and see if maybe they can be a Band-Aid solution or even a long-term partner for whatever it might be, right? So sometimes, right, you have a software agency that's working on maybe like side projects or more like new product development because it gives you some new energy or whatnot. But sometimes, right, it can be all sorts of reasons, but these investors become, if they really trust what Erin's doing, it becomes a really easy referral. Be like, hey, we've worked with Erin in the past, or we know a lot of companies. Again, it kind of goes back to like this under promise, over deliver. You do that enough, and the same concept works here with investors as well. So kind of an interesting thing here. The interesting piece too, this is actually how I met Erin, was from just working with agencies that don't do software. So an example, right, would be marketing. And as I talked about in the Asia Orangio video, right, growth for a company is twofold. It's product and the marketing, right? So if you're working with companies, right, especially maybe it's a marketing agency, and they're, things are going really well, but now like, hey, we got to build this new feature 1, feature 2, feature 3. And again, maybe you don't have the software team to do this, or maybe you just need extra hands, whatever it might be. the marketing agency, because if they know Erin, can be like, hey, you should go talk to Erin for, maybe they can help you build these 3 features, right? So that goes hand in hand, right? So because you have a marketing team that's like, hey, things are growing, but the product and the team is now things are, going really well. So we need to keep building, right? And this kind of can be a two-way street, right? Sometimes you're building product and things are going really well, but now like, hey, we need more marketing help or whatnot, right? So these kind of industry network partners, right, that you're not doing the same work, but you're doing adjacent work, can be a really cool referral system. And if you like working with these different agencies, it kind of helps you build it's like kind of a cool sub team or like kind of a team of some sort. And you kind of can build a network that you really like working with all the time, and on really cool projects. So that's Erin Rollenhagen in Entrepreneurial Technologies. You can learn more about Entrepreneurial Technologies by going to entretechno.com. If you found this video helpful, I would love it if you can give it a like. And if you're looking for more content like this, I'd love it if you can check out the newsletter in the description below.